Welcome to theUpStreamLife.com. I'm your founder and editor, Vishal Krishna. I love talking security, especially about India and India's security digitally. We expect that there'll be more than trillion attacks, cyber attacks in India by 2033. It's a report that's online. You can check it out. And probably by 2050, there may be attacks, reaching to 17 trillion a year. And this is dangerous. And so, for good security management, you need identity management. And doing that is Okta. And Okta is a company that I have experienced. And I'll tell you that this podcast will enable you as a firm to understand where identity begins. And that's where security also begins, okay? Today, I've got Ben Goodman, who's going to be talking about Okta's play in security and how they're changing identity management. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Thank you. Ben, thank you for being on the podcast. I've been a fan of Okta ever since I became a businessman. Every American company that I work with has Okta as a identification management tool. And, because I work on my phone as a vendor a lot, and I access everything from outside their, location. And Okta is always around. It's omnipresent, to say. So for our audience, quickly, to the GCCs out there and to the young startups watching this and to upcoming startup founders, what is Okta?
So I love that Okta's everywhere. We are the world's identity company. But what does that mean? So Okta's mission is to help everyone use any technology safely. And part of that is making sure that we connect people with the technologies they need for work and life. So think about Okta's heritage. We help companies really move applications to the cloud. You'd use things like Salesforce and Workday, and Okta would be the tool that would connect you with those. Over time, we evolved to connect to customer services. So think about organizations like OpenAI. When you start a new account with OpenAI, you are using Okta to create that account, authenticate that account, and constantly re-engage. So Okta's job is to connect people with the technology, whether it's consumers with the technology they need for life, employees with the technology they need for work, or businesses to other businesses to make sure that they can safely authenticate and engage with each other. And that's why you're seeing Okta everywhere, because we touch every industry, every type of identity, because we want to make sure people have that technology, but have the security and safety and confidence to use it.
It's interesting. And I want to get through a lot of examples. I always thought it's just going to be identity management, but it's much more than that. You spoke about an airline, moving loyalty points seamlessly. And I didn't know that security played a role there and identity played a role there. And you did that for an airline, didn't you?
Absolutely. So think about what's an airline today. Well, they're a booking system for passengers to go in and book services. They're a way for people to protect confidential information like their passport information, to accumulate loyalty points, which is currency, right? It's currency like in your bank. You can use it to buy flights or buy hotels or whatever it is. And so we need to treat that with the same level of security that a bank would treat your bank information. So we start to do that, we need to make sure you are who you are, that you're engaging from the right place, the right location, so that you can have confidence that that asset, which is your identity, is protected. So we work with many airlines on their loyalty programs, especially airlines that might have multiple brands in the market where they want to have those brands be independent, but have a single customer loyalty or customer identity program so they can apply the right security policies and the right experience. So airlines, hotels, many organizations globally leverage Okta through the acquisition we made a few years ago of a company called Auth0 to really transform that customer identity landscape and give that great experience for both customers and security.
How do you get all these players together? You have brands, you've got the airlines companies. How do you do that? I mean, when you come in, is there an hypothesis for the airline saying, look, there's a merger that's just happened, or we've acquired somebody, and we're trying to get these our customers to move into this new app? Where do you start? Then they have these hundreds of brands. How do you begin that process?
So I think it's important with anything that you've got to anchor on who their customer is. As an airline, you're the customer. So the airlines in India, you're a customer there. So whether you're flying from Bangalore to Delhi or Bangalore to San Francisco or to Singapore, ultimately they've got to anchor around you. And so when businesses start to think about you as the customer and building technology services that best suit you, that is when identity becomes really important. Because the most important thing is, across all of their touch points, how can they ensure you are who you are? Therefore, the experience personalization, sharing of data, all of those elements becomes really seamless. And so we're seeing organizations make this shift to say, yes, I might have multiple brands in the market. Yes, I might have multiple products in the market. Yes, I might have affiliations. But for me to give a really good customer experience, I want to make sure that there's one login that a person can tie their identity to that gives them access to all of these. This idea of brand federation is becoming a big factor because we know customers who have too many brands in market with different experiences and inconsistent experiences tend to see a lot of customer churn.
Yes.
And we know it's very easy for someone to lose confidence in a brand. It's very hard to regain it.
One bad experience and people do move fast.
And it could be you've got to reset your password too many times, or a security incident or a data leak. So working with these brands, we help protect them from the data leaks and credential stuffing attacks, which is a big factor. But more importantly, we help them to really elevate their customer experience, both through brand federation and also leveraging things like passwordless. Because ultimately, if all you need to log into your account is Face ID, but it's still secure enough to validate who you are, that's a much better experience for you as a consumer than having to put in an old password or authenticate through an OTP every time. So we're seeing a lot of that transformation.
Wow. I mean, transformation is a great word. And we're living in a sort of a nervous planet with so many changes. There's, people talk digital transformation. They talk about AI. Yeah. I'll get to AI in a bit. Let's talk our favorite subject, healthcare and retail maybe.
Yes.
There's this digital supply chain, new brands again, new vendors. How are organizations, large organizations in the retail space, protecting identities? Verifying that the customer is the right customer and the right vendor to speak, right? Is the right vendor coming onto the network? Data leaks are the order of the day. Today you see hacks happening everywhere, right? Phishing, emails, right? And how do you triage this whole thing in a B2B perspective, especially in retail?
So I think the first thing you've got to anchor around as a business, and a lot of organizations are coming to this conclusion, is that your digital supply chain is either the strongest or weakest link in your business. You can have the best security policies within your company. You can have all the best cybersecurity vendors deployed with best practices, but you work with a third-party supplier or a third-party legal firm or audit firm who doesn't hold your standards, and you have to give them access to your systems. You've introduced risk into your business.
Absolutely. So these people are they're not standardized. They don't have any SOPs on security, right?
Or inconsistent SOPs.
Yes.
And so the question is, as a business, how do I extend the services I need to these suppliers? SAP as a good example in terms of supply chain, Marketo for marketing firms, all those kind of elements, in a way that allows me to not impact productivity in the business and not create barriers for collaboration, but can enforce my security policies in a way that I can potentially have them run on their own devices that might not be my standards, but they're still phishing resistant and they still adhere to my security standards. We talk about this in the context of an extended workforce. If you think about the healthcare example you gave earlier, or an airline, they're going to have extended workforce who aren't employees of the company, but interact every day with that company. Airlines are probably a great example. Fuelers, people who are cleaning the cabins, they're all outside the system, but they've got access to critical infrastructure, critical assets. And so as airlines and healthcare companies start to think about their extended workforce, they're leveraging technologies like Okta to make sure if these people have access to any applications, by driving that access through Okta, they can enforce the security standards. And then leveraging things like zero trust as an approach to make sure that they're looking at all facets of that engagement. The devices they're using, the networks they're accessing, as well as the authentication and authorization. And so we believe organizations are adopting a zero trust approach to their own design, leveraging platforms like Okta for an extended workforce engagement is giving them an edge around being more flexible around their digital supply chain, the vendors they can work with, but also enforcing the right security policies for their business.
So by doing so, what do they get? Obviously, they're fighting some bad actors, right? You're also enforcing certain standardization on the employees that we also care about your credentials, right? My primary question here is, how did this change happen? Is it because technology has changed so fast that identity management had to change? We moved from two-factor authentication perhaps to then there's, we had this API revolution that happened. We had multi-tools. For example, me as a media company, when I work with clients, Some of them have to access my AI apps. I've got plenty of AI apps on the media side that these organizations have never used. And suddenly we're making this content on AI and we want to push it through a network. It's very difficult. There's lots of blocks. And that's where Okta comes in and makes my life easier.
Absolutely.
But to convince these organizations of that transformation that, look, the world's changed. You got to work with multiple partners. I mean, how tough is it to sell to a CTO on this? Or do they get it? Or is the conversation still around public cloud security? I think that infrastructure layer is all passé now.
So I think there's two separate elements here. So if you start to think about what are the tools for business?
Correct.
So Okta has a business at work report that looks at all the trends across business tools for creative collaboration. We see a lot of great elements in there. One interesting element that's come up on the marketing side with AI, with generative AI democratizing marketing capability, tools like Adobe and Canva and Figma have become much more prevalent in firms because they're needing to outsource less to firms and can do more internally.
You're reading my mind, yeah.
And so there's a big element there in terms of generative AI democratizing more business tools to be used within a business. So if you're a CIO or a CTO, suddenly I've got more application vendors I've got to start standardizing against and leveraging. And that's creating challenges for CIOs and CTOs because to attract the right talent and to be as productive as you can be, you need to give people the right tools for work.
Yes.
And those tools are getting broader. And so in an ecosystem where that diversity of tool sets is important, having an identity platform that supports neutrality to support as many tool sets as possible. Okta today supports about 7,500 tool sets out the box, Salesforce, Workday, Canva, and others.
Correct.
That's a really big factor in terms of CIOs and CTOs being able to give the business the tools they need to be successful whilst also having the controls in place to make sure they're not creating exposure for the business. So that's one element of it, which is
have they got to that conversation? Have they appreciate it?
Neutrality and diversity of tool sets is becoming a really big topic. And so as they're looking at standards, and we can talk a little bit later around a new standard that's coming onto the market around this, because the standards haven't really existed till date, but they're evolving very quickly. We are seeing neutrality and diversity of tool sets becoming a really big value proposition for organizations in terms of both productivity, but also talent.
Yeah.
You start to think about people who went to university, their parents might have used Microsoft tool sets at work. They studied in university using Google tool sets, or in India, a Zoho tool set. Or companies need to have multiple email platforms.
You're again reading my mind, yeah.
And so that's becoming a big factor. So when we talk about neutrality, it's a word thrown around the industry quite a bit, but neutrality is your ability to rapidly integrate any tool set into your business, apply the same standards for protection and security, but really democratize capability and productivity back into a business.
It's interesting you say that because as a vendor, I work on Google.
Yep.
And my clients all work, everyone works on Microsoft. There's large companies. Suddenly there's this, marketing teams, they get confused. Do we send it on Google? Do we send it on Word?
And then you've got Zoom, and you've probably got Blue Jeans and Google Meet and Teams.
You said it right.
And the answer is you've got to have them all.
And then you sit, and there's a marketing guy who sits on the table, then there's a CTO who sits on the table, there's a back and forth happening, and they're worried about productivity. They're saying, man, we can't have these conversations. We got to make it happen because younger people want to move where things happen fast.
Yep.
It's a creative world, right?
So you need neutrality, you need productivity, and you need security. And it's a holy trinity there that's
Tell me about that.
But I think the other element is, so that's the internal dilemma that CIOs and CTOs are faced with. Probably the external dilemma, and this has been really accelerated the last couple of years, and probably on the back of some of the really large breaches we saw over the last 5 years. Sony, Optus in Australia, multiple ones in India. If you look at what's actually been the main driver behind that, it's been compromised credentials for third parties.
No, it's third-party vendors?
Third-party vendors.
Wow. So they enter like that?
They enter like that. They go and find a cleaning company that might have access to a payroll system and access through that, or a marketing firm or a legal firm or an audit firm. And what became apparent was that the CIO and CTO community in their businesses were not actively aware how many non-employees had access to critical systems. We had this world where you had an HR system that kept a record of every employee. And we tried to link access to that system. What happened when we needed to give someone in, let's say, an audit? We just created a username and password that wasn't in HR system, wasn't trackable. We forgot about that. That person moved company. They gave the username and password to someone else. that became a shared credential. And in a lot of places, they had access to really critical systems. And so CIOs and CTOs weren't aware of this because those decisions weren't being made in technology. They might have been made in the legal department choosing to collaborate with this law firm, or a marketing department looking to collaborate with this
I didn't think about that. That's complex.
And so when these breaches started happening, CIOs and CTOs went, we have a lot of people that have got credentials in our system who don't sit in HR. So when they leave the company or join the company and move roles, I can't change their credentials. And these standing privileges were a massive issue.
Wow.
And that's been the big evolution of the last 5 years of going, whether you're a full-time employee or a contractor or a business-business partnership, we have to manage every identity as if it's an employee in the company in terms of the controls, have the right mover, leaver, joiner, the right governance, the right privileged access controls in place, but we can't limit it to just the people who are full-time employees.
Okay, Ben, I want to ask you another interesting thing. There's this new thing called sales agents that are AI-led.
Yeah.
A lot of the healthcare firms in the US are using sales agents, AI-led sales agents.
Yeah.
How's that going to change the dynamic of security? Because somebody can create a fake AI as a sales agent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great thing. I've seen these AI things close deals.
Yep.
At least the pre-sales are getting a seat on the table.
Yep.
But if you don't verify it, it can completely go wrong. But I'm a fan of AI. Let me be honest. It enables sales to go to another level.
So I'm glad you raised that, and it's very timely. So Octane, our global conference a couple of weeks ago, we actually announced Auth for Gen AI. Mm-hmm. And it's to solve exactly that challenge. If you think about the potential of AI in the future, we have the ability to democratize and automate a lot more business services. Mm-hmm. So think about someone who's on a lower tier insurance policy wanting to go to a high tier insurance policy. Traditionally, that would involve a lot of people on the insurance company side. Now AI can automate it. But we always want to make sure when a transaction is taking place that a human is involved in the process. And number one, if you're accepting a transaction, we're validating you are who you say you are. So an AI system can't take control of your credit card and make transactions on your behalf.
So the creator of the AI should take the responsibility of the verification.
Well, the creator of the AI should have in their process a way to validate that you are who you say you are. Mm-hmm. So we talk about that customer identity use case, your zero acquisition. You can build these amazing processes around AI. When it comes to a point of transaction, the ability for that system to leverage what we do to go, okay, we're going to validate who you are. So we want to do a push to your phone, make you authenticate via a Face ID for step-up authorization, so that even though AI will do 99% of the process, that bit which is the transaction, that bit which might require you to input personal information is always validated by you as a human being with the right credentials to make sure that even though AI is accelerating the process, we are putting the controls in place to make sure a human is always involved in those transactions. And we believe that will be the method. So if you're using AI services that don't use step-up authorization to validate who you are, you probably don't want to be using those AI services because you can't attest to the fact that they are the right AI systems behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
AI systems that are built with your authorization at heart, the ability to say, before you make a meaningful transaction, we're going to authenticate you are who you are with the right controls and right approaches, will be a leading indicator that these are the right AI services that are being built by the right companies.
Got it, Ben. Quick thoughts on how's the world changing in 3 years in terms of this security service at the edge, right? We're talking about edge security services now. This AI is at the edge in a way, right? So where do you see security evolving through Okta, in the eyes of Okta, with AI?
I don't think there is an edge anymore. Okay. I think so.
You're saying everything is so seamless. There's nothing called the edge.
I'll shift it to a slightly different perspective. Please. You have a credential that says who you are. That credential is linked to an Aadhaar card in India that's got a number. Yeah. And there will be organizations that want you to share that.
Yeah, which we do all the time now.
There'll also be a credential for when you log into work.
Payments.
Yeah. There'll also be a credential for when you go and do contracting with another company.
Yes.
The reality is who you are doesn't change through that process. The only thing that changes is what information are you willing to present at that point in time to validate who you are for that purpose. And so if you start to think about credentials being the security that defines you, and the security industry wants to evolve to make sure the factors that define you consistently evolve. getting around future issues around deepfakes. Right? Deepfakes are a big challenge right now. They're forcing the industry to get smarter with factors. When you talk about factors, it's ways to validate who you are, whether it's a YubiKey or Face ID or biometrics or other methods that are coming about. I believe there's an element of the security industry that's going to evolve that constantly wants to stay ahead of the threats to make sure you are.
Correct.
Because if you can validate you are who you are, your identity is protected as much as possible.
Yes.
The question then becomes, what credentials do you need to share for a particular service or transaction? If I log into a work account, as I do today at Okta, I don't need to share many credentials. I just need to validate who I am. If I'm going to go buy an insurance policy, I need to validate I'm over 18, income, those kind of things. Healthcare, I need to validate I've got an active healthcare record. So if you start to think about identity security no longer having a core or an edge, it's evolving to a point where you have a credential that's verified and constantly evolving to stay verified, that has multiple different applications in the industry, both for work and life and collaboration. That's where the industry is going as a whole. That's what Okta is very much driving to, because we believe if we can move towards the identity standards, and we announced at Octane, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's called IPSI. It's identity.
IPSI is fine.
IPSI. We'll go with IPSI. But IPSI is the first industry standard around identity profiling and how organizations can implement identity standards across their business. We are in collaboration with many of our peers across the globe and the OpenID Foundation to help organizations to define this, because one of the challenges right now is there isn't an identity standard that's pervasive across every industry and every company. We know there's a lot of governments trying to challenge that. We see in Australia a big investment around digital ID. In India, Aadhaar through UID is a big factor, but it's a method. We see in the UK evolution in this space, and definitely in the US. The lack of a standard right now is doing a couple of things. Number one, it's making it very hard for organizations to know when they're secure enough. Number two, it's making it harder for public sector and private sector and cross-country collaboration. And number three, it's creating challenges around cybersecurity talent, because as talent's going through the academic programs and skilling up, they don't necessarily know what they need to skill up to. So we believe IPSI as a standard will help solve those three problems over the coming years. It's very nascent. We announced it a couple of weeks ago, but we believe it will start to become the baseline for government policy, financial regulations, and many other standards that need to happen.
I didn't realize that's a whole different podcast topic, actually. This is a huge... I didn't know that there was no security standardization.
There's security standards, but when it comes to identity, there is no standard global identity around security.
Is it because who owns identity? The state or the country or, the individual?
Well, it do different things to different people, right? If you're a corporation at Okta, Okta owns my identity in the context of the company. I'm a Singaporean resident. I have a national identity that is linked to me in Singapore, and they use a platform there called SingPass. You've got Aadhaar here.
Yeah, true. And Australia would be something different too.
Australia would be something different. So if you think about that standard being a standard of identity that says, right, irrelevant of who owns it, we all subscribe to a minimum level of security, minimum level of data retention, minimum level of standards that we need to adhere to. As those start to harmonize together, what happens is that collaboration and interoperability becomes much, much easier. And that's a challenge right now. There are plenty of security standards, have been for many years, but they're not enabling organizations to come together in the right way. Imagine a digital supply chain where you could make decisions on vendors that you wanted to work with, whether they're physical suppliers, services suppliers, by whether they complied with an IPSI standard or not.
Got it.
That makes it much easier for you to make decisions on technology choices, firms you want to collaborate with, countries you want to operate in, because you now have a standard that you can respect.
Let's talk about this quickly, because we're running short of time. Startups.
Yeah.
It's better to build those startups. Right? You want to catch them early so that startups work with a lot of vendors, mostly freelancers. Gig economy. How do you ensure that by signing into a light model of Okta, you build a company, help them, enable them to build a company, grow the company, and manage all those vendors? And there's a standard you set right at the beginning. Is that something that you're looking at?
Absolutely. So Okta's heritage actually comes from the startup community globally. And I think I'll come back to that neutrality element. What do startups need to do? Be agile. Right? If you get good talent and that talent comes in and they're a 10Xer for your business, but they want to use 73 other development tools.
Absolutely.
You need to be able to say yes really quickly. And so what's the power of Okta? We allow organizations to confidently say yes to a really broad perspective of tools that people can use in business, have the right policies in place, and it's that perfect balance of friction and productivity. So our heritage is very much from the startup market. And you'd see, you said Okta was everywhere.
Yes.
You'd have worked with firms that have been startups or are startups and have grown. And so Okta very much has our heritage there in terms of helping organizations and continue to do so.
All right.
But we help them in two ways. Number one is around Okta Workforce, which is really around their internal tools. But the other element is around customer identity. Most of these startups are building tools that are there for the market. It could be a new technology, it could be a financial services offering, and they want to give their customers a really seamless experience from day one. So between Okta Workforce and Okta Customer Identity, we have self-service sign-up plans that allow startups to come in and
I can just get in as many vendors as freelancers as possible.
Absolutely. And as you progress through the complexity of your business in terms of what you're managing, employees and other things, we will move you through the Okta journey. But we absolutely believe every startup should be starting their business on Okta from day one, because it gives them the platform for growth, gives them a platform for diverse tool adoption, gives them the right way to interact with their customers, and it's that perfect balance of flexibility, agility, and security on day one.
Okay.
Which is, if startups get that right on day one, everything else is easier.
So can there be a 10-member team and still work with Okta? They say there may be a 10-member team, but work with 100 different vendors.
Yes.
They can get on
absolutely.
Okta all the time. Okay. So, there's so much talk, and everything that we spoke about is, I'll host you again on the podcast, because everything, the standards itself, I want to host you again and talk about it in detail, right? But for a lack of time, I want to get into some personal questions. You're a cricketer.
Yes.
At least used to be.
I love cricket.
And a cyclist at that.
Yes.
What do you do now? Do you do a lot of sport?
Like most young athletes, my body did not keep up with my intentions. So unfortunately, I don't play cricket anymore and I don't cycle anymore. But like, again, most people my age, you end up in the gym and trying to repair all the body damage of younger years. So
get back to weights.
But a lot of it's right now is my kids' sport. Right. I've got two kids and
they keep you busy.
They keep me busy, but the sports they play are different to what I play. My younger son loves fencing and rock climbing.
Do you do any fencing?
I don't do any fencing, but I watch him do fencing, which is fantastic, and bouldering competitions. I don't even think rock climbing was a thing when I was a kid. My oldest is a bit more traditional sports, tennis and football, but it's really great. I take a lot of pride in watching them and doing the sideline parent coaching, which is always a lot of fun.
So are you a demanding dad that you got to perform like any Australian, like you got to go do the sport?
Yes. My rule is they have to play a team sport, they have to play an individual sport, because they've got to develop the ability to collaborate with people, but also personal excellence. And so it's really good watching how they do that, and they thrive in different ways and have different levels of tenacity and passion for it. But every Sunday morning, 7 a.m., go to the gym with my youngest.
That's good family time, man.
Yeah.
Are you reading anything?
I don't read as much as I would like to. I do listen to a lot of podcasts. One that's particularly interesting is Risky Business out of Australia. It's just a really active review of the current state of cybersecurity.
Wow. It's called Risky Business?
Called Risky Business.
Nice name.
On Apple Podcasts. And it takes a bit of a global lens. There's another one called The Contrarians, again, another Australian group. They tend to look at what's happening in the retail e-commerce market globally and weighing in opinions in terms of how that's turning up in Australia as a market, but more importantly, how it's affecting the region. Books, reading less of, but just reading a lot more articles. I think AI is becoming really interesting, and there's 85,000 different perspectives on policy, regulation, applications. And so I spend a lot of my time just reading different lenses on that. What's evident right now is there's no right or wrong answer. There's no standard around AI yet. Governments want to let it grow, but also have a little level of control. And so I spend a lot of time just reading different people's perspectives on that.
Yeah, last question. If you advise your kids on something, I mean, with so much happening around AI.
Yeah.
It is, and that's why I call it a nervous planet.
Yeah.
How do you advise your kids or anybody watching this, any young person watching this, on how to deal with a current situation as a leader? What would you advise them?
So I came from a very traditional background of go to university, get a degree, get into the subject.
Similar.
My guidance to them now is be as diverse as you can in what you learn. I don't care if they go to university, but I care that they learn about 10 different things, whether it's woodwork, metalwork, or how to design quantum compute. Have a broader knowledge base as possible. Because yes, AI will start to creep into some industries and limit job opportunities, it will create other industries and create new. We don't know what they are. And so in a world where you don't know what the next iteration of business is, a broad range of skill sets and a very key method of how to learn new stuff rapidly is, in my view, the most valuable skill set.
No,
and so learn broad.
Yeah, learn broad, yeah.
Know how to learn deep where it's applicable, but learning broad at the moment is what I advocate my kids to do. And unfortunately, they take that advice
seriously. I hope so too. Same. I have 2 younger ones, and I hope they take this advice seriously. You're right. Learn broad, but try to go deep in a few subjects.
Well, learn broad, know how to go deep.
Yeah.
And that's one of the really good things about AI. AI to go deep, using your own skill sets to go broad is actually where I think that perfect unison's got to come together.
Remain relevant.
Remain relevant.
Ben, this has been fantastic. Thank you.
Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Thank you so much.